Okay, welcome to live stream. We're just going to be following up a little bit more with the new 10.7.3 update, which was released yesterday, along with a slew of other updates in terms of the operating system, in terms of iOS and iPadOS. All of everything really bumped up yesterday a little bit. And while the Logic update is pretty small, it's a typical list of bug fixes and things. What we want to look at a little bit is how the new head tracking feature works. And then we also want to look at maybe this overarching trend that's happening right now with Apple in general, because I think that it's kind of interesting what they're doing. It's not something everybody's going to be happy about. Certainly, I know a number of people online who are going to be pretty upset about this, but I think that it's worth potentially taking a look at and just exploring a little bit, because there was something, it was kind of hinted at previously, but I would say that we are now full on past any kind of hints, and we should expect all of this stuff with the silicon chips to really just kind of take over from here on out. And some of that has to do with the Mac Studio computer being released. But I think that we're certainly, in deep now with the silicon stuff in a way we haven't been before. So first and foremost, excuse me, we want to look at just what is compatible with Logic 10.7.3. And this is the update list from yesterday. You can see the release dates all updated now. And Logic 10.7.3 is available for Big Sur 11.5 and later. And so if you have something that's pre-Big Sur 11.5, I guess you're not going to be able to update to 10.7.3. Now, just because 10.7.3 works with 11.5 and later doesn't mean that everything works with it. And so the first thing that we notice with the new features, especially the spatial audio monitoring with dynamic head tracking on these devices, they require both a Silicon Mac, but it also has to be updated to 12.3, which is the new version that just came out yesterday. So you have to have a computer that's capable of running the latest version of Mac OS Monterey, and you need to have the M1 processor inside of it. So those two things together mean that this feature is not going to be available to everybody. In fact, you could have spent $55,000 on one of the Mac Pros fully stocked out, and you wouldn't be able to use this feature with them. Just because you have to have the Apple Silicon, according to what they're saying here with the features. And I believe it. I mean, this is a really finicky new thing, partially because with the headphones, the AirPods Max, the AirPods Pro, the AirPods third generation, which now do spatial audio, and the Beats Fit Pro, all of those can do spatial audio. And spatial audio on a Mac was just now released yesterday as well. Before that, we couldn't do the head tracking with spatial. I mean, spatial audio was there before, but in a fixed way. And the head tracking to be able to actually turn your head and hear the spatial audio really just came to OS yesterday. And so with that, that was one of the most important things for getting this into Logic. Logic isn't actually really doing it all by itself, the headphone tracking stuff, the head tracking. It's piggybacking on the the 12.3 Monterey to do it. And so we end up with the two features relying on each other to be able to do this. The other part of this, of course, to be able to monitor through the Apple binaural renderer, that also requires Mac OS 12.3. And so you're stuck with that for either one of those. Additionally, there is an option to actually preview the Apple renderer through speakers of your computer, but that only applies to the computers that have the spatial audio capability with the hardware speakers. So I've got a Mac Mini M1. That feature doesn't work on my computer because it doesn't have the spatial audio speakers built into it. So that's it's going to be like one of those things where if you need a feature, you need to make sure you have all the pieces lined up together. Okay, so that being said, I did discover one other thing. I made a video last night about the updates. And when I first went into this, I'm going to actually put in the AirPod Pro for a minute, because if you don't have them in, they don't activate. I'm going to turn off noise reduction so I can hear my own voice still. The noise cancellation on these things are really good if you get a good seal, a good fit. Let's go into preferences. You'll see AirPods Pro show up as an output device. And these, you could do this before. So they would show up as an output device before yesterday's update. However, there's new features now. And some of those you can see if we click up here. You'll see noise control, and then you'll see spatialized audio. So you can do off, fixed, or head tracked. And that's mostly, anything will work with this since it's part of the system. If I'm watching a YouTube video, it'll keep the YouTube stereo sound in front of me as I move my head back and forth. And so it works in a limited fashion with that. With spatial audio on Apple Music, the music actually does go around you, and the same with Logic. And so there's a few things with Logic now that we have that set up. Let me show you one of my favorites first. And I'm going to go to Project Settings, Audio. So I'm not even going to turn on spatial audio yet. I'm just going to go to 5.1 surround sound. And that's just my surround format. I'm leaving spatial audio off. And let's just load up an instrument. We'll do retro synth and turn it down a little bit so it's not too loud. And then on my stereo output, but before we get there, let's set this to surround output for this channel. So now I've got 5.1 panner here. Cool. And I got my instrument, which is a stereo sound source. On my master track, I'm going to do, it's up here at the very top, but I'll show you it's down here in imaging, spatial audio monitoring 5.1. So now this new plugin, spatial audio monitoring plugin, will let me hear this through the Apple renderer or the Apple renderer with head tracking. And if you have one of the typically MacBook Pros with spatial audio, you can also render for built-in speakers, but that's just not connected right now. So I can do the head tracking, and you're not going to hear this the same way I do, but if I play a note, that sound is staying in front of me. So without spatial audio even turned on, I can monitor 5.1, or it's really, there's no subwoofer attached to my head. So I'm doing a traditional surround format with a surround panner, and I'm using the Apple renderer with head tracking to be able to hear that sound as it stays in front of me. This is huge in some ways. It means if I'm, traveling someplace with an M1 Mac, and I want to mix when I'm on an airplane, right? I've got decent noise cancellation. I've got head tracking, all with AirPod Pros that fit small into my ear with no cables or anything. And I can be doing a little bit of surround mixing. Say it's for a post-production project or something, or even just some, surround music for some reason. Now, we've kind of left surround formats behind at this point. You know, if we're doing something for television, sure, there's still some surround formats or movies, but even those we're now going to Dolby Atmos. And so we're doing spatial audio for that. But if you have a project you need some format for, then you can now use just this to be monitoring without having to have a full surround sound setup. And so this is super useful. I think that this is actually really incredibly useful because we don't even have to engage spatial audio for this. And we can do the head tracking on any of our different formats. Let's turn this off for a second. And let's go back to a stereo output. I am curious. I haven't actually tried this next thing yet, but we have a stereo output. And so it's only there when you engage the surround sound. Cool. The one thing, and I need to backtrack for just a second. When I first did my video yesterday about this, early this morning, I couldn't get the head tracking to work. I tried. I had installed everything. I worked on it, and I just couldn't get it to work. And then it occurred to me that I had missed one step that was actually pretty important, and that is turning off Rosetta mode. And so that is a thing. It doesn't work in Rosetta mode. So you go to your application, you do the info with Command I, and you'll see open using Rosetta as an option there. When Rosetta is turned on, the head tracking feature doesn't work. And so you actually have to make sure that you are running this in non-Rosetta, which means that any plugins you have which require Rosetta, you can't use with the head tracking feature. That right there says so much about where we're going in the future with Apple and their hardware and software. The fact that head tracking only works on Silicon Macs in the first place says so much about this whole thing. The fact that a $55,000 computer that doesn't have silicon can't do this says something about Apple and this change that they're making. They're definitely going to cut loose some people who just spent a lot of money on computers in the past year or two if they're trying to do this type of work. But the new Mac Studio obviously is a ton of power, and for a fraction of that cost is going to be a beast when working with things like Logic and spatial audio. The other thing, so in context, having the Apple renderer involved with this, and let me open up the actual Dolby Atmos stuff now. Having the Apple renderer as a part of this is a big deal because up until yesterday, there was no real easy way to just work on your project while monitoring in the exact format that people would be listening to your project later. Now, we can actually do this. And in fact, Logic is currently the only one that can do this. Nobody else is able to monitor through the Apple renderer, which is the exact one used on Apple's music streaming service, at least for the minute. If they update that, I don't know if they're going to, update what we have here, or if these are tied into the operating system. And so every time we get an update in the operating system, then we'll get an update on that. It's a little bit murky for me exactly how this is all going to tie together. I wish that they would say, there's an Apple rendering engine that we use for streaming. It's version 1.1.3, and the one in Logic is 1.1.3, or it's 1.1.2, and we're one version away from each other, and so here are the differences. We don't get any of that stuff. It's all underneath the hood. But we can hear the binaural Dolby renderer, which is what we had up until yesterday. That's just the binaural renderer. And now we can choose Apple renderer or the Apple renderer head tracking and hear exactly what somebody who's doing some Apple Music streaming in spatial audio is going to hear. On top of that, so say that we're just going to do this. We have a studio that has 7.1.2 or 7.1.4, and we're working in that studio, and we want to hear what this sounds like on headphones, which is a really important thing because you can have all the beautiful speakers in the world, but if everyone's listening on AirPods, one version or another that has spatial audio, I mean, even the non-pro version of those third generation ones have spatial audio now. You don't want to be mixing on a big speaker system and assume that it's just going to translate well. And there's no way that that makes any sense. You mix on the big speakers for other reasons, so you can hear everything and make good decisions. And it's like working in a really high-tech laboratory. But then you have to make sure it translates over into the other stuff. So after the Atmos plugin here, then we put on the spatial audio monitoring plugin, and it takes all of that output from the Dolby stuff and it converts it into Apple rendered headphone tracked audio. So we can use these in combination to not only hear on the big speakers, but then also hear it on the small speakers. And so we get to really double check everything. The real test is going to be, do people think that what you're hearing through this Apple renderer in this system is exactly what you're hearing when you stream it off Apple Music? And I'm excited for people to start doing those tests because I think that there's something to look at with that. Okay, I'm going to pause. I'm going to look over and see what comments we have. I think, David, that's going to be a different video with the summing stacks, inside summing stacks. We'll do that a different time. Not really as much with the spatial. We're going to stick with the spatial stuff for the day. But I can definitely look at making a video surrounding some of that another time. I don't do that an awful lot just because I don't find a lot of personal value in my workflow with it, but there's certainly some interesting nuances with doing some of the summing stuff that I think are really valuable for some people. I know you're like, just talk about it now, and no, I want to talk about the silicon stuff. So the fact that we now have true advanced features which only work on Silicon Macs. The door has been opened and notice has been given to anyone who uses Logic that you need to realize that every update from here on out is likely to have stuff that's just going to be for Silicon. And so if you think, oh, you know what, I want to do some of the spatial stuff, I'll buy like a 2019 iMac Pro or something that's pre-silicon, you're not going to be able to do all of this stuff. I mean, you're just not going to. Once again, Apple has shown us how genius they are at the marketing game. I've read tons of articles and seen tons of artists who are all releasing their music in stereo and spatial audio simultaneously. And there's a number of teams out there doing these conversions into spatial audio, and the industry is spending a ton of money doing this. I mean, there's a lot of money being spent on this. And Dolby Atmos as a system was available in other places. I mean, you could do Dolby Atmos with, the upper version of Pro Tools or Nuendo and all these other places. None of them have access to the Apple renderer. And I don't know if Apple, I think if they're smart as business people, they're going to say, you know what, let's just keep this in Logic so people have to, go out and buy Logic and update it and get it a new Silicon Mac to run it with. And I mean, this is going to be like a bump in sales and attention on Logic for a few weeks, because anyone who's doing this on other platforms, all of a sudden they're hearing this with the Dolby renderer instead of the actual Apple renderer being streamed on Apple Music. And so I think it makes a huge difference. So Immersive just asked, I'm on Intel, what am I missing? So far, you're just going to be missing the Apple renderer and the Apple renderer head tracking, which is the ability to hear the spatial audio in its final format using Apple headphones. You can move your head and everything. You actually get to listen in spatial audio now. And if you're on an Intel, you can't do it because it's not, for whatever reason, I'm sure it's a dual reason. One of them being that they're releasing spatial audio and OS Monterey with Silicon Max, and they've only programmed it to work in that format. And I don't know if that's just a speed issue or processing issue or whatever. I can't imagine that they couldn't do it on other ones, but that's what they're doing it. And so that means Logic can only do it on the Silicon Mac as well. So some highs and lows with that for sure. But the fact that I can only do these new spatial audio features on an M1, and I can only do them with Logic running in non-Rosetta. You can't be running in Rosetta to use this either. Is certainly a warning sign to any of those programmers, really, software companies that are releasing plugins for us, that they better get it going. And I've talked to a couple different companies who do software plugins that work with Logic, and I think they're like, it's just taken us longer than we thought. And I keep on thinking, so you thought it would be easy and you procrastinated, because this is not new. I mean, M1 has been around now for a while in terms of programming life cycles. And so the fact that some of them haven't done it means that they didn't really take it seriously and they thought that they could just get away with it. Another couple things here. Let me come back to the notes. A few things were really a big deal in here. And they're also some of them silicon related. First one was this item right here. When an audio unit's plugin crashes while running Logic Pro on Apple Silicon Macs, Logic will continue to run and automatically reloads the plugin after selecting Recover from the Recover Quit dialog. This is a big deal. This means that we're going to have less crashes due to weirdness with third-party plugins. And so I think that this is going to be an interesting thing. The fact that it's only with Silicon Macs, again, makes me wonder if that was a choice that somebody made or if there's an actual reason for it. That part, is above my pay grade in terms of understanding how this all works. But, I don't know what the difference is between the two architectures that makes it so they can keep everything running while one part of it crashes. Seems like something you could likely do in both places, but if they had to make a choice, if they said, you know what, we're only going to fix this on one side of this fence, obviously they're going to do it on the silicon side because that's the future of Apple. And then David says, do you know how it's updated for Studio Max? Well, I don't know the specifics. There's nothing in this that's different on the Macs. I don't think that any of the different computers that are new that Logic is really different on. It's just going to be more powerful. And every time they do this, they enhance it for them. So this new version is optimized for the M1 Max and the M1 Ultra on the new Mac Studio. It's just every time that they come out with a new computer, they have to optimize it for the new thing. Even though it would likely work as is, they still want to make sure that it can, take advantage of all the new power and stuff that's happening. Let's see, there was a couple other small things. Obviously, they're trying to just get rid of some bugs and things. Another one with the audio units is that playback now stops if an audio unit plugin quits unexpectedly. Just stops everything, so then you can determine what to do next. I mean, there's just all Apple Silicon Macs are written all over this release note. One thing I thought was interesting that maybe some of you will think is interesting, because I was looking around seeing what was different, and I don't know if you all noticed, but we're missing a window option in our menus. Does anybody see which menu option is missing? Dun, dun, dun. There's no option here in the menus for the environment. Now, they didn't delete the environment. You probably would have heard about that already. But they took it out of the menus. Partially because any of you who use that, or who have never used it, who are new Logic users, you're going to just never even know it was there. You won't accidentally stumble upon it. So, interestingly enough, it's still there. I mean, you can still get to it, Command 0, the environments, right? But the way that Apple often hides things, if you hold down the Option key when you open this menu, it's still there. You have to hold down the Option key to do that. I wonder, honestly, so 1, 5, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. And it looks like they're mostly the same. I'm always wondering, if they hide one thing, are they going to hide other things at the same time? And no, looks like it's all the same. The other place that they do this is in the audio effects. So if you go to audio effects and click on one, like a plugin area, if you hold down the Option key for that, Legacy pops up. And you can see the old Averb, the bass amp, the de-esser, the denoiser, all of these old EQs that are still there, Gold Verb, Groove Shifter, Guitar Amp Pro, Platinum Verb, Silver Compressor, Silver Gate, and Speech Enhancer. All of those plugins are still there. You just don't have them open by default, and you have to hold Option to go into the Legacy. So there you go. Okay, cool. So, interesting that the environment is pulled out of the menus, but it's still there and it's not disappeared. Key commands still work for it. It's still referenced in various places, but I wouldn't be surprised. It's now closer than ever to just going away in terms of us being able to use it, and it just, if they still need it for functionality, it's there, but I wouldn't be surprised if it disappears in a more permanent way at some point in the future. So that's what we're looking at. All the spatial stuff is pointing towards just more and more of this being shifted to silicon and away from everything else. And of course, the new Mac Studio looks cool. I mean, it looks cool. It looks super cool. And it's probably going to be super powerful. And if I had, between $3,000 and $5,000 sitting around, you bet I would buy one. But for the moment, the M1 that I'm using, the Mac Mini, is chugging along excellently. And so I think it's a really great option. Now, keep in mind that the M1, all of this stuff, that is still the iPad. And the iPad Pro has an M1. The new iPad Air has an M1 in it. And so those are beasts of machines. And the other thing that came out yesterday, of course, was the new universal control stuff, which, I don't remember where was. Yeah, universal control. under displays. So I don't have my iPad is actually sitting out in the hall right this second. So there's nothing in there to control. I could grab it, I guess, but my iPad sits right down below. I don't know why it keeps on flipping out. It sits down below, and anytime I move, there we go. Anytime I move my mouse down below, it goes onto the iPad, and my keyboard switches over to the iPad. And I'm waiting. I'm going to do a video all about that because I'm curious on what applications we have for music. But if you have the iPad set up with the IDAM protocol, so you're running MIDI to the iPad over the cable, and you have like an instrument loaded up, and the audio from that instrument in the iPad goes into your Mac. As I'm working on Logic, I can just simply, adjust a fader up here, pull my mouse down to the bottom of the screen, it goes right onto the iPad. I make some adjustments, I go back up. It's actually making the iPad a better part of our recording studios and music production studios. And so I think that that's going to be really interesting. I want to make a video more about that because, but I want to explore it a little bit more because I think that with universal control, I'm interested to see exactly which things we can do with this and how much it really is going to be an effective or efficient tool with it. Okay, Music Factory Studio says, just did my update with an M1 Mac Mini, iPad Pro, and M1 Max MacBook Pro, and Universal Controls. Pretty nice to use a trackpad on all three machines. I agree. It's super true. And I don't think you have to have an M1 to use it. I feel like it's going to work with some of the older ones. I need to look that up. I actually haven't done too much research on how far back it's going to go. But I think that, it's going to be nice to be able to do some of this stuff. And I hope that they continue to unify them because imagine having two Mac Studio computers right next to each other, each doing different things, sunk together so that you can, handle different tasks with each one. And I mean, the power becomes really scalable in that situation. Not that you would need it at this point, but the more power that Apple builds into its hardware, the more that they can be like, you know what? Remember that thing we wanted to do with Logic 10 years ago, but the computers weren't tough enough? Well, now they are. Let's go ahead and do it. And all of a sudden, we get some really amazing things out there. Or, some other company that has a lot of real fresh talent and creativity flowing in Apple's like, let's buy them and put it into Logic. That's always a possibility too. And I'm technically okay with either of those if it makes our lives easier and more powerful. But the universal control is really promising. It works so far flawlessly. I haven't had any issues. And so I think that was really cool. And Music Factory Studio says now if they would bring back Logic Note. I was just talking about that with some students this last week. And I think that it would be interesting if they could do something over that with all the new technology. The thing is, if you just spend an extra $1,000, when you buy the Mac Studio, you don't need the Node thing. I mean, that thing's a beast and it's going to be able to handle any project you can throw at it. So you don't really need it, but who says just because we don't need it means we don't want it? I don't know. Sharing that power, yeah, for sure. Well, I think I just wanted to do an update on this because I think it's, even though it's a small 10.7.2 to a 10.7.3 update, that's a insignificant number increase, but being able to do headphone tracking is certainly a big deal and something worth talking about. So I think I'm going to end the stream now and just post this video up. So if you want to go back and look at it, or for anybody else who's interested in learning about this, they can see it. But short and sweet today. I'm going to do another stream probably on Thursday or Friday where I'll do a bunch more Q&A. We're trying to make March our month of live streams on this channel. And then April, take a break from live streaming probably and just do some normal videos. And then in May and June, got some big, cool trips happening where we'll make some videos from those. But if you're interested in these, make sure you subscribe and hit the reminder thing so that you'll see when we do live streams. And I don't usually post them up more than about 10 minutes before I start them, just because I don't know I'm going to be doing one more than 10 minutes before I start it. But thanks for joining on, and go back and check out the rest of the video if you just came on. We just looked at some of the features and talked about some of the issues, and how if you don't have an Apple Silicon Mac, if you don't have an M1, that man, you're just like obsolete already. Hate to tell you, but mostly joking, partially serious, and it's certainly something we're going to be facing. Anyway, see you everybody, and thanks for joining. Talk to you later.